Imagine finding out that a single drone strike in the Middle East just completely paralyzed peace negotiations in Eastern Europe.
It sounds like a stretch. Right.
Right. Because, it is incredibly tempting to look at the globe as just this map of isolated boxes. You see a conflict happening in one box and then another situation unfolding in a completely different box thousands of miles away.
And you naturally think they have absolutely nothing to do with each other.
Exactly. But the reality is, the globe isn't a map of isolated boxes. It's a hypersensitive tripwire. You pull one single lever in the Middle East, and suddenly, like, an air defense shield drops over Eastern Europe.
Yeah, the interconnectedness is just staggering.
It really is. And today, we are going to untangle what might be the most complex global domino effect we have seen in years.
And that domino effect is moving incredibly fast, by the way.
Yeah.
We are looking at how a newly erupted conflict is, well, fundamentally rewriting global alliances, halting diplomacy, and completely restructuring the global supply chain for military defense.
So to do this, we are analyzing a really highly detailed geopolitical dispatch from the KULT Patreon. It's a phenomenal resource.
Here he is, yeah.
Because it synthesizes all this recent hard-hitting reporting from, the Associated Press, Politico, Bloomberg, and Al Jazeera, all into one cohesive picture. Our mission today is to figure out exactly how the recently escalated U.S.-Iran conflict is directly, mechanically, impacting Ukraine.
Right. But before we get into those mechanics, I do want to establish some necessary ground rules for our discussion today.
Oh, yeah, please do.
So the source material we are unpacking today involves active wars. It specifically mentions the recent U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran that occurred on February 28th.
Right, very recent.
Very recent. And it also involves direct statements from highly visible political figures, including President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. So I want to be entirely clear with you, the listener. This deep dive takes no political sides whatsoever.
Not at all.
Our objective is strictly to decode the geopolitical facts and the strategic mechanics that are presented in our sources. We're just here to help you understand the shifting global landscape, impartially and objectively.
Understood. We are just reading the map today, essentially. And looking at the physical resources, the first thing this map shows us is a pretty stark reality about military hardware.
Yeah, it's alarming.
We're starting with the most immediate, tangible consequence of the conflict in the Middle East, which is this sudden massive drain on global military equipment. President Zelensky issued a very urgent warning on a Sunday following a Saturday news conference that was reported by the AP, and he stated point blank that the war in the Middle East poses a very high risk of depleting Ukraine's air defense reserves.
Right, and he specifically noted that Washington's diplomatic attention and its energy are rapidly shifting away from Kyiv's fight for survival.
Yeah.
And that shift is not just rhetorical, it is highly operational.
Politico actually reported on this exact concern. They quoted a NATO official who laid it out bluntly. The official said, "It is clear that Ukraine will be affected as the U.S. will prioritize its domestic needs."
Which makes sense from a domestic standpoint, but geopolitically.
It's a nightmare for Ukraine because the U.S. is suddenly consuming these incredibly expensive air defense munitions for the Iran conflict. And these are the exact same munitions that Ukraine desperately needs to repel Russian missile attacks. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Imagine two massive neighborhoods are on fire, but the local fire department only has the budget and the water pressure to handle one at a time. The Center for Strategic and International Studies provided a statistic here that I honestly cannot stop thinking about.
The production numbers.
Yes. Before these dual conflicts broke out, the United States only produced about 270 Patriot missiles per year.
Yeah, that number right there is the crux of the entire issue.
Wait, how is that even possible? I mean, we spend nearly $1 trillion on defense. How is the primary supplier of Western air defense only building 270 of these interceptors over a whole 365-day period?
Well, what's fascinating here is that this specific number reveals a much deeper, completely systemic vulnerability in how we manufacture defense technology today.
Okay, how so?
Well, you can't just 3D print a Patriot missile on demand.
Right.
They require highly specialized solid rocket motors. They require incredibly complex radar seekers that rely on rare earth metals and microelectronics.
Wow.
And crucially, they require a highly skilled, specialized labor force to actually assemble them. Following the Cold War, the Western Defense Industrial Base basically consolidated. They optimized for peacetime efficiency.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, they adopted the exact same just-in-time manufacturing models used by commercial car companies.
Oh, well, really?
Yeah, it keeps costs down, sure, but it completely eliminates wartime surge capacity.
So it's an industrial reality check. It's basically a math problem.
Precisely. We often think of modern warfare in terms of battlefield tactics or the will to fight, but fundamentally, modern warfare is a battle of industrial capacity.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you are a city under siege, you might need to fire 30 interceptors in a single night just to defend your grid.
30 in one night.
Yeah, and 30 interceptors is more than a month's worth of total U.S. production.
Oh, my God.
So if you have two different geopolitical theaters demanding those same highly complex, slow-to-build missiles, the industrial base physically cannot sustain it.
Which means the American fire hose, to stick with that analogy, is being redirected to the Middle East. And if the water gets cut off from one source, you have to find another immediately.
Right. You have no choice.
And that forces a massive strategic pivot. Zelensky actually went to Paris on Friday to meet with French President Emmanuel Macron. And their primary discussion was about European-made SAMPT systems. They are looking at these as a direct alternative to the U.S.-made Patriot batteries.
Because, with a lack of a clear picture regarding available U.S. munitions, Ukraine has to look toward Europe to fill that critical void.
Right.
The SAMPT system is essentially Europe's premier anti-missile shield. It uses a different radar architecture than the Patriot. It provides a full 360-degree coverage as opposed to the Patriot's directional radar.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it fires the Aster family of interceptor missiles, which are manufactured by a European consortium rather than American defense contractors.
There was a specific phrase Zelensky used during these talks that I really want to highlight here. He stated that Ukraine would be, quote, at the forefront of testing any viable alternatives.
Yeah, that phrasing is key.
Hold on, let me get this straight. Is Ukraine basically having to volunteer as a live-fire testing ground for European defense tech just to keep their skies safe?
Well, this raises an important question, and the answer reveals how necessity forces radical innovation. In peacetime, testing a new air defense system integration takes years. You have controlled simulations, massive bureaucratic approvals, sterile testing environments.
Right, lots of red tape.
Exactly. Ukraine doesn't have years. They are offering to take these European SAMP systems and plug them directly into the most intense, demanding combat environment on Earth.
Wow.
It is a massive operational risk to rely on a newer integration, but it is also a highly strategic move for the future.
How so? Like, what's the long-term play there?
Because if Ukraine successfully proves that these European systems can hold the line against complex, real-world ballistic and cruise missile barrages just as well as American Patriots, it changes the entire marketplace.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. It could permanently shift the balance of who supplies European defense architecture long after this current war ends. Nations that typically buy American might realize, hey, we can rely entirely on European manufacturing.
That is wild.
Ukraine is surviving, but they are also potentially breaking an American defense monopoly out of pure necessity.
That is a staggering ripple effect. But the fallout from the February 28th attacks doesn't stop at physical weapons, does it?
No, not at all.
It's not just the missiles that are freezing up, it's the diplomatic machinery, too. The peace talks between Ukraine and Russia have completely stalled out.
Yeah, and this is where we see the interconnectedness of geopolitical leverage. The U.S. had been actively sponsoring trilateral peace talks between Ukraine, Russia, and U.S. envoys.
Right, and the dispatch named Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as the specific envoys involved in this mediation process.
Correct.
And these weren't just, like, hypothetical talks. There was actual momentum here. 3 rounds of negotiations had already taken place this year.
Which is significant.
Yeah. 2 of those rounds were held in Abu Dhabi, and 1 round was held in Geneva, so there was an established cadence. But because of the eruption of the conflict with Iran, the U.S. has officially postponed these talks.
Which, unfortunately, strips away the momentum. You can think of diplomacy like an engine, and an active, focused superpower acts as the spark plug.
I like that analogy.
The mediator provides the leverage, the security assurances, and the pressure necessary to keep adversarial parties at the table. When the U.S. shifted its operational bandwidth to the Middle East, that spark plug was removed. The engine flooded.
And without that spark plug, you get this incredibly tense dispute over the venue for the next talks.
Yes, the venue dispute.
Washington stepped up and proposed hosting the next round of these trilateral talks on U.S. soil. But Moscow completely refused to send a delegation.
Because the venue in diplomacy is never just about a meeting room.
Right, it's way more than that.
It is about who controls the environment, the optics, and the physical security of the delegations. Washington wanted it on their turf. Moscow balked.
And Zelensky's response to this venue dispute was very firm. He said, "We're waiting for a response from the Americans. Either they change the country where we meet, or the Russians must confirm the U.S."
Putting the ball right back in their court.
Exactly. And Bloomberg's reporting added another layer to this, noting that Zelensky told his nation earlier this month that the necessary signals for a trilateral meeting have not yet arrived.
Yeah.
The machinery has just broken down. The U.S. is too distracted by Iran to force Moscow to the table or even compromise on a neutral venue.
Right, and without sustained attention from the primary sponsor, friction over something as administrative as the location becomes an insurmountable roadblock.
So if you're Ukraine and you see the Patriot missiles being redirected and you see the peace talks collapsing because Washington is distracted, well, how do you get that attention back?
It's a tough position to be in.
Extremely.
Yeah.
If you can't get peace talks and you can't get missiles, how do you force yourself back into the center of the geopolitical conversation?
You have to offer something they need.
Exactly. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Ukraine decided to prove they are deeply useful to the other war, they are pivoting from being a consumer of defense resources to becoming a critical supplier.
And this strategic countermove centers entirely around autonomous systems and drone technology.
Yeah, so President Donald Trump recently asserted on Fox News Radio that Washington does not need Ukrainian drone technology. But Zelensky firmly rejected that claim. His counterclaim was that U.S. military institutions had actually approached Ukraine multiple times, specifically requesting their assistance.
Which is a huge shift in the dynamic.
It's massive. And we aren't talking about a casual exchange of blueprints here. There is a massive defense cooperation agreement currently on the table, which remains unsigned, notably, but it's worth between $35 and $50 billion.
That is an astronomical figure.
Right. And this agreement covers roughly 200 Ukrainian companies specializing in drones, artificial intelligence, and electronic warfare.
Yeah, the scale of a $50 billion agreement is immense. It reflects a hard truth. Ukraine has essentially become the world's leading laboratory for drone warfare. Traditional military-industrial complexes are just struggling to adapt to the speed of cheap autonomous threats. Ukraine has learned, through brutal trial and error, how to adapt AI and electronic countermeasures at a pace no one else can match right now.
I really want to break down exactly what that means. The technology here is wild. We hear a lot about these Shahid-type drones.
Right, the Shahids.
What exactly are those, and why is Ukraine so good at stopping them?
So the Shahid drone is originally an Iranian-designed delta-wing loitering munition. They are often called kamikaze drones.
Okay.
And the defining characteristic of a Shahid is that it is incredibly cheap to produce, sometimes as little as $20,000.
That's nothing in military terms.
Exactly. They use simple commercial GPS or GLONASS for navigation, and honestly, they literally sound like a loud moped flying through the sky.
Really? A moped?
Yeah, very distinct buzzing noise. And because they are so cheap, they are deployed in massive swarms to overwhelm traditional air defenses. It makes zero economic sense to shoot down a $20,000 drone with a $4 million Patriot missile.
The math just turns against you immediately.
Exactly. So Ukraine had to develop alternative kill chains.
What does that look like?
They created vast networks of acoustic sensors, essentially thousands of microphones placed across the country that use AI to identify the specific engine noise of a Shahid drone.
That is brilliant.
Right. That AI instantly calculates the drone's trajectory and sends targeting data to highly mobile fire groups equipped with heavy machine guns or their own cheap interceptor drones. They also utilize advanced electronic warfare to spoof the GPS signals of incoming swarms, causing them to crash harmlessly into fields.
And Ukraine is actively deploying that specific expertise into the Middle East right now.
Yes, they are.
The dispatch confirms that Kiev has deployed their own interceptor drones and their own electronic warfare specialists to help protect U.S. military bases in Jordan.
It's incredible.
They're literally taking their acoustic networks and AI targeting systems and plugging them into American defense perimeters. Furthermore, Ukraine is currently holding talks with Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait.
That's a huge footprint.
Yeah, 11 different countries have requested Ukraine's assistance in countering Shahid-type drones.
It is a brilliant strategic maneuver. By deploying specialists to Jordan to protect American assets, and by opening dialogues with the Gulf states, Ukraine is actively attempting to weave itself directly into the United States' Middle Eastern security architecture.
Right, making themselves indispensable.
Exactly. The geopolitical logic here is undeniable. If Ukraine can make its electronic warfare and drone interception technology absolutely vital to the U.S. and its allies in the Middle East, then supporting Ukraine's domestic survival suddenly becomes a matter of U.S. national security in both theaters of war.
They are making themselves too valuable to ignore. Exporting this drone tech isn't just a business transaction. It's a deeply political lifeline. And that brings up a pretty jarring reality about how the West distributes its resources.
Right.
The analysts at CEPA, the Center for European Policy Analysis, pointed out that Zelensky's offer to share all this drone expertise is heavily loaded with political messaging.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the political undertone is driven by immense frustration regarding resource triage.
Oh, absolutely.
The dispatch includes a quote from Keir Giles, a Russia specialist quoted by Al Jazeera, that captures this dynamic perfectly.
Yeah, I saw that.
He noted, quote, "More Patriot systems have been deployed in the Middle East in a few days than have been supplied to Ukraine in 4 years."
4 years versus a few days. For you listening right now, just consider the weight of that disparity. This highlights how rapidly the arsenal of democracy has to triage its allies.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the zero-sum nature of current global defense resources. When a nation's industrial base can only produce a limited number of systems, every interceptor deployed to a brand new conflict in the Middle East is an interceptor physically denied to a city in Eastern Europe that has been rationing them for years.
It's a brutal reality.
It really is. It explains exactly why Zelensky is sounding the alarm about depletion and why Ukraine feels compelled to leverage its drone technology to buy back geopolitical capital.
So what does this all mean? Let's just trace the path we just walked.
Let's do it.
A sudden conflict erupts with Iran on February 28th. Because of systemic industrial bottlenecks, that immediately drains the global supply of U.S. Patriot missiles.
Right.
That drain physically forces Ukraine to pivot to France to test European SAMPAT alternatives, which could potentially shift future defense monopolies. At the exact same time, the diplomatic distraction causes Washington to lose its convening power, stalling vital peace talks between Ukraine and Russia over a bitter venue dispute.
The engine floods.
Exactly. And finally, to claw back the leverage they need to survive, Ukraine exports its hard-won drone and AI expertise, deploying specialists to the Middle East and negotiating with a dozen nations just to prove they're an indispensable asset to the global security order. It is a massive, breathtaking chain reaction.
And it leaves us with a critical paradigm shift to consider. We are witnessing the evolution of national survival strategies.
Yeah.
If a nation's survival today depends not just on international goodwill or even on a shared belief in sovereignty, but rather on proving that its military technology is completely indispensable to its allies' other wars, well, how does that change the way countries will develop their tech economies in the future?
Oh, wow.
Will every tech startup eventually have to become a defense startup just to ensure their nation has a seat at the geopolitical table?
That is an incredible question, and honestly, a profound one to leave on. It really changes how you look at the world map. It is one giant, highly sensitive mechanism, and right now the gears are spinning faster than ever. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We highly encourage you to keep looking beneath the surface, keep tracking the dominoes, and keep questioning the narratives behind the news. Until next time.